On the morning of December 16th, 1960, 2 passenger flights departed the Midwest bound for New York City. Neither plane would reach its destination. Instead, both would collide over the city, raining debris over Staten Island and reducing a row of Brooklyn brownstones to burning rubble. The crash, the deadliest in history at the time, occurred just 4 years after the Grand Canyon mid-air disaster, and the public was left wondering, why had this happened again? United Airlines Flight 826, a Douglas DC-8 carrying 84 passengers and crew, took off from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport bound for Idlewild Airport. 11 minutes earlier, Trans World Airlines Flight 266, a Lockheed Super Constellation with 44 on board, departed from Dayton, Ohio for LaGuardia Airport. Just 4 years had passed since the Grand Canyon mid-air disaster that had ushered in sweeping changes to the aviation industry, including the implementation of radar. Both airliners were flying under instrument flight rules and followed a series of airways governed by radio ground stations called VORs. At approximately 10:21 a.m., the crew of United 826 informed their operations department that the number 2 VOR receiver had failed. This would make navigation and communication with the ground more treacherous. This message, however, was not relayed to air traffic control. At 10:33, LaGuardia Airport contacted Flight 266 to inform them of air traffic 1 mile away. This traffic was Flight 826. 2 seconds later, the United Airlines flight advised Idlewild Approach Control that it was approaching the Preston intersection at 5,000 feet. Unfortunately, for everyone involved, this was not the case. Despite reporting they were approaching the intersection, they had, in fact, flown 11 miles beyond this limit, not entered the required holding pattern, and, most importantly, had done so without clearance. Disaster was just seconds away. Air traffic controllers at LaGuardia saw 2 radar targets merge. One then continued to the northwest, while the second remained stationary, then made a slow right turn before disappearing from the radar screen. The collision lasted a split second, but dealt devastating damage to both aircraft. The TWA flight began a terrifying death spiral, plunging uncontrollably to the ground. Witnesses in Staten Island reported a sound like thunder, then were greeted with the horrifying sight of the plane plummeting from the clouds. It landed in what was then the US Army base at Miller Field, as well as a nearby residential neighborhood. United 826, with damage to both wings, somehow continued to fly, but it didn't get very far, and began to descend over Brooklyn. It crashed in the Park Slope neighborhood, killing everyone on board. Well, not everyone. 11-year-old Stephen Baltz was found in a snowbank. He had somehow survived the terrifying ordeal, but his prognosis was grim. He had suffered serious burns to his face, neck, and shoulders. He explained the crash to his doctors. "I remember looking out of the plane window at the snow below covering the city. It looked like a picture out of a fairy book. It was a beautiful sight. Then, all of a sudden, there was an explosion. The plane started to fall, and people started to scream. I held onto my seat, and then the plane crashed." The following day, while being comforted by his father, he closed his eyes, went to sleep, and never woke up. In total, the collision killed everyone on board both planes, plus an additional 6 people on the ground. Investigators were able to analyze the flight data recorder of the United Airlines DC-8, the first of its kind to be used in a major investigation in the United States. The data told a grim story. It was the DC-8 that was off course. By the time of the collision, it was 11 miles beyond its clearance point, and traveling way too fast. So why didn't air traffic control notice? New York Center did not contact Idlewild Control in advance to report that the plane was entering its airspace. If it had, controllers at both locations would have to confirm the plane's position on radar. Somebody would notice that United 826 was off course. And why was the plane off course? investigators noted that the crew of Flight 826 were given a shortcut that reduced their flight distance by 11 miles. Not coincidentally, the same distance by which they had bypassed the checkpoint. In the aftermath, investigators recognized that the way air traffic control was handled in the United States, even with the advent of radar, was a mess. The FAA drafted a number of new rules to improve safety. Pilots must report malfunctioning equipment to air traffic control and lower their speed when approaching checkpoints and airports.